Today I'm going to explain an American film called Bubble Boy. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A boy named Jimmy Livingston is born with no immunity whatsoever. So he has to be kept in isolation. He cannot touch anything without it being decontaminated. Hence, he will have to live inside a bubble-like plastic sphere for all his life to survive. His mother, Mrs. Livingston, is overprotective of her son. He wasn't even allowed to come home. However, after he turned 4, she and Mr. bring the little boy home in his bubble. His room, too, has a huge bubble so he can walk inside it. The bubble has a pair of protruded hands that his parents can use to touch him. All his toys are decontaminated to be free of the smallest of the germs and kept inside the bubble. Jimmy has lived in that room ever since. Mrs. Bubble, so she ends all the bedtime stories with the princess dying because they were let free, is only allowed to watch one TV channel and read one magazine, because misses are the only ones ever made. She also uses the protruded arms to cut his hair and hug her son. Mrs. thinks are reasonable and forces her ideas on him, so he goes along with it, but it doesn't work to his advantage. Rap and make fun of Jimmy outside his home, Mrs. Livingston chases them away frequently. The only food Jimmy eats is homemade, a plastic tube where Mrs. Livingston places his food to kill the germs before Jimmy can fetch it. Jimmy is now 16 years old. He gets an electrical guitar instead of a car. A new girl his age, named Chloe, moving into his neighborhood, but cannot do anything about it. More so, he doesn't know anything about love or girls. His mother senses his infatuation and recites the story to Jimmy about a boy who died because he touched the next-door whore. A lot, she also notices him watching her. To him, but he doesn't know what. One morning, he wakes up with an erection and is petrified. Unknown to the concept, he hits himself with a bat. He cries and calls his mother. Mrs. Livingston comes in and makes him repeat the Pledge of Allegiance until he calms down. Has a group of popular friends who make fun of Jimmy, calling him the Bubble Boy, defensive towards him. One day she knocks on the Livingston's door and Mr. Livingston lets her in. She sees the system of plastic tubes all around the house and is fascinated. She follows the tube and reaches Jimmy's room. Mother is the only woman he has talked to. Chloe talks to him and tells him she likes his guitar. Jimmy tries teaching her to play it with the protruded hands of allegiance in the middle of it. Starting that day, the two hang out together every day. Mrs. Livingston doesn't like their friendship, but cannot do anything about it. Them spending time together follows for his birthday, and even brings kids inside his room for Halloween. A drunk Chloe sneaks inside Jimmy's room through the windows, claiming she cannot stay away from him anymore. However, she passes out before she can go in. The scene cuts to Chloe's prom night. Up and Jimmy is devastated. Mark offers Jimmy a cigarette, but he doesn't know what it is. One night, Jimmy sees Mark and Chloe make out through his windows. The very next day, Chloe comes into Jimmy's room and shows him her engagement ring. Mark had proposed to her to marry him, and she has come to inform Jimmy. Jimmy is disappointed but doesn't show it in his face. She has also brought him a gift which she keeps inside his decontamination tube, but Jimmy ignores it. Instead, he gives her the guinea pig back and asks her to go away, her eyes. Later, Jimmy opens the gift and sees it is a snow globe with "I love you" written inside. Surprised, he screams her name and decides to go to Niagara Falls to stop the wedding. He works hard to make himself a portable bubble shield and is finally successful. He sneaks out of the house without his parents knowing. First time, he reaches the bus station and asks the person there for a bus ticket. However, Jimmy has forgotten to bring any money. When he is hit by a bus, he goes flying to the ground, but his bubble saves him. The people from the bus come out and offer to give him a ride, but he gets to know that the people are part of a religious cult. They angrily throw him out of the bus. Their leader announces a round man inside a globe to be the savior sent by God, that Jimmy was their savior, and sets off to look for him to take him out of the globe. Meanwhile, Jimmy meets a biker named Slim, someone else, Wildfire. He then offers Jimmy a ride, and both of them make their way to Niagara Falls. At home, Mrs. Livingston finds Jimmy missing and freaks out. Misses after 24 hours of the disappearance. Rest. They have a lot of fun at a casino, but Jimmy only has 2 days before the wedding. So he leaves Slim at the club, steals a scooter, and runs away in it. Jimmy comes across his parents' car, who tries to stop him from running. Jimmy gets into an accident, but thankfully, his bubble bounces him into a running train. He escapes his mother, but is now trapped in a train with talents from a freak show. Tell him about their boss, Dr. Freck, who keeps them captured and uses them in his freak show. Jimmy meets Dr. Freck, who happens to be a dwarf, his bubble, and frees the other freaks. Then he continues his way to Niagara Falls, can hardly use a scooter anymore, so he goes to a restaurant to ask someone for a ride. A bunch of police officers bully a man named Push Pop. They assume Jimmy has a contagious disease and run away from the place, on fire in the chaos, and Push Pop offers Jimmy a ride. He also agrees to take him to Niagara Falls. Somewhere else, Mrs. Livingston reaches Dr. Niagara Falls. Furious, she calls Chloe and yells at her for making Jimmy run away. Dr. Freak. The freaks outside steal her car. A cow in the middle of the road. Are a symbol of God, but following his mother's word, Jimmy tells him that his religion is false. This offends Push Pop, so he leaves Jimmy on his own. He asks for a ride from an old man named Pippi, to which he agrees. And the man is still driving the car, and the car hits a billboard. Jimmy goes into a grocery store and calls Chloe. Mark picks up the phone and tells Jimmy to give up because he is about to marry Chloe in an hour. He is now hopeless. So he calls his mother and asks her to come to pick him. Both his parents drive to him and get him inside the car. When Mr. Livingston asks Jimmy how it felt to be outside for the first time, bond. Mr. Livingston tells Jimmy to not give up before trying. Stop the wedding. Mrs. Livingston sees this and follows him in their car. Cult group finds Jimmy and follows him as well. Jimmy, too. Slim locks eyes with Mrs. Livingston, who happens to be his old love Wildfire. Turns out all of them are driving on a plane's runway with an old pilot. Waterfall. Thankfully, his bubble doesn't let him drown and rushes his way to the wedding. Enters the church, claiming his love for her. He puts his life in danger and tears his bubble open to kiss her. He falls unconscious. As Chloe tries to wake him up, Mr. and Mrs. Livingston arrive there too. Mrs. Livingston mourns her son's death when Mr. Livingston asks her to tell everyone the truth. Mrs. wakes up these years. Jimmy is shocked, but forgives his mother when she claims she did it to protect him. He finally embraces Chloe as everyone claps. Cut to a few months later, getting married. Everyone he met during his journey is at the wedding. Mr. and Mrs. Livingston and Slim are now a throuple, away in a car to their honeymoon. Turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.